Ready.
Hello again, Alan from teachersmoney.net. I'm going to continue our conversation with Ben, our investment director at Teachers Money. So, good morning, Ben. How are you?
Morning to you, Alan. Yeah, very well. Thank you very much.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So, Ben, to carry on from where we left off pretty much last time we spoke, about offshore investments, they're all a bit of a mystery to some people. Some people may have some strange ideas about them and, not necessarily know a great deal about them. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about them.
Well, what offshore is, you mean?
Yeah, offshore investments.
Okay. Well, if you read The Guardian, Alan, you'll be of the opinion that anybody who puts money offshore is trying to hide his money from the tax man. The money's likely to be dirty in some way. And the whole thing is ridiculous and should be closed down immediately. The Guardian doesn't have a clue about that as well as many other things. So let me explain what offshore means. And probably it's best to start with the origins. If we go back to the 1960s, early 70s, not that I remember the time very well because I was a small boy, but then we were in a situation where the empire had come to an end, leaving all over the world literally millions of British citizens working and living in places like the Gulf, Asia, Africa, engineers, oilmen, teachers, nurses, doctors, architects, all the professions. And it's a vagary, it was a vagary of the British tax system, as it still is, that Brits are not allowed, if they are non-tax resident, let's call that living outside the UK, they're not allowed to contribute to a UK pension, okay? Because contributions to a UK pension get tax relief. Brits abroad are not paying UK tax, therefore they were barred from a form of saving which gave them tax relief, which was a UK pension. So the British life insurance companies thought about this and this large British market living overseas, and they what they did was they set up subsidiary companies in places like the Isle of Man and Guernsey. Those two were foremost, but there were others, which are what we call them nowadays international financial service centres, but they're otherwise known as offshore zones. The Isle of Man and Guernsey, in particular, are British dependencies or other statuses. But they are fiscally or financially independent. They can set their own rules. And one of the rules that both of them and others had was that there's no tax on investments made by people who live outside the Isle of Man or Guernsey or Jersey or wherever it was. So these life insurance companies were therefore able to offer this large British diaspora to start with pension products, which would grow with no tax. Okay, and but I mean that's 50 years ago. If we come up to date, we're talking about a global industry worth tens of billions of dollars, which is open not just to Brits but to expats of any nationality, with one qualification which I'll come to. And the locals of many countries. So let's think about somebody in China. You could be teaching in Shanghai or wherever you might be. You can invest offshore, but so can a Chinese citizen. There's no law against it. We'll come to the benefits of offshore investing a little later, but so that's what it is. We're talking then about a vast industry now, offering an enormous range of products and services, from banks, insurance companies, fund management groups, trust companies, offshore company formation experts, all of these professional providers offering services which allow the little guy, you don't have to be rich anymore to invest offshore, to take advantage of the benefits.
Right, got it. That's exactly a good thing, interesting thing. That's one thing that always struck me many years ago when I was first heard the term offshore investment. I always thought you had to be a billionaire,
And well, you certainly have. Well, if you go back many, many, many decades, then you were talking about British aristocracy, and they were very wealthy. But no, those days are long gone. I mean, there are offshore savings products now, monthly savings products, which start at $100.
Yeah.
So we're certainly not talking about the rich guys. Now, I said there was a qualification. Since President Obama's FATCA Act, that's FATCA, Americans are effectively barred from investing offshore. There are one or two products available for American citizens who are non-resident in the US. They are very specialized and they start at relatively high levels, $150,000, but they are IRS friendly. They're friendly within the American tax system, but they're still offshore. Apart from that, you have an American teacher who wants to save, $500 a month. They can't do it now. They're not allowed to do it, and Canadians also are effectively locked out of offshore investment as well.
Right.
Not because of simply because the national government back home has made it very onerous to do so in tax terms.
So disadvantageous then.
Yeah, so we're talking about all nationalities bar North Americans, effectively.
Okay, fine.
Right.
Okay, that's very nice, very nicely put for us, Ben. But so very quickly then, what would you say are the benefits of offshore investing?
I think there are key ones. If we talk about all nationalities, there are maybe four. Then for the Brits, which I'll come to at the end, there's one in particular. The four generic ones, though, first of all, I think the biggest benefit by far is that your savings or your investments offshore grow with no tax. Now, so do other investments back home. If you're, for instance, an American, most of their investments back home are free of tax, or they can offset them against income tax. But for a lot of people, that's not the case. Brits, for instance, if you invest into an investment trust, what is known to many people as a mutual fund, back home, back home, then the Chancellor of the Exchequer will receive annually between 19 and 22% of the growth. Now that's a fifth of the growth goes to the Exchequer. Remember what I said last time about compound growth?
Yes, yes.
So if you're taking a fifth of the annual growth off that compounding effect every year, clearly over a 10, 15-year period, it's really going to add up. So that doesn't exist offshore. You get no tax on the growth of the money, which means that the compounding effect is maximized. In simple terms, you get more bang for your buck. That's number one.
Okay.
Number two, I would say, is the what we call portability. You're a teacher starting off at a school in Kuwait. You work for 2 years there. You then go to an IB school in Beijing, work for 3 years there. You end up in the UAE at a school for 2 years, and then go and do 7 years in Argentina. You've had a career offshore, but you've moved around. What do? Do you open up some kind of little local scheme? in every country that you're going to work in. You'll end up with little pots of money everywhere. How do you manage them? How do you take care of them? How do you link them together? It's
Yeah.
impossible. So with offshore, you start off a plan, let's say in Guernsey, and you just take it with you. Wherever you are, you contribute to it, to one place, and when you're taking money from it, you receive it from one place. It's dead simple. So
Right.
these things are completely portable. You can contribute to them and take money from them wherever you are. Okay.
Yeah, it's
So
kind of like leave it and let it be, and let it look after itself almost, isn't it?
um, well, I'm assuming that you're contributing to it throughout that period.
Oh yeah, but
But
apart from the contributions, you don't really do anything, do you?
well, it's monitored and you need to watch it, or that's what we do on the client's behalf. But
Well, exactly.
yeah, the point is, Alan, you can contribute to it from anywhere. It's one
Yeah.
fixed point where you're building up your money. You're not having to open
Yeah.
up different schemes in China,
Mm.
Malaysia, or wherever else you are. Yeah.
Right.
So portability, very important. Number three, I would say, is the confidentiality that's still applicable offshore. Things have opened up in recent years. There have been one or two moves on behalf of the international community to introduce greater transparency. The better jurisdictions have reacted very quickly to that and have regulations in place and legislation in place, for instance, as far as investor protection is concerned. That's easily the equivalent of the UK or the US, easily the same level.
Yeah.
So these are very squeaky clean jurisdictions. And even though things are more open than they were, if you're the kind of person who isn't hiding any money or wanting to cheat the tax man, but simply you like to have your affairs close to your chest and keep them confidential, your offshore savings and investments still afford you that benefit. Okay.
Understood.
And I think for a lot of our clients, we see the fourth reason coming into play. And I'm sure they'll forgive me, but if I home in on one particular nationality, but they are far from being alone, and that's our South Africans. There are an increasing number of South Africans going abroad, leaving South Africa to teach, large numbers in the Gulf, as we know very well from our time there. In Asia, China, there's a lot. And, these are highly professional, well-qualified people trying to improve a position back home, which is very likely to involve a relatively low salary, plus all the problems of the transition to majority rule and so on and so forth, with very high crime levels and corruption and so on and so forth. And so increasing number of South Africans, but as I said, they're far from being alone in terms of nationality, are leaving the home country and going abroad to improve the lives for themselves and their families. Now, for them, they may well send some money back home if they have aged parents or others they may be supporting in South Africa. But it makes perfect sense for them to be saving money outside the country in a hard currency so that their money is shielded also from the currency depreciation, the weakening of their local currency.
Indeed.
So I mean, I'm talking about South Africans, but they are not alone. Other African nationalities, exactly the same thing applies, and the same for Brazilians, Argentinians, Colombians, Venezuelans, and so on. There are, unfortunately, a large number of nations out there which are struggling, and their qualified teaching professions are beginning to move abroad. So for
Right.
those guys, and there are a large number of them, saving offshore is absolutely the perfect solution.
Yes, it seems to make perfect sense. All right,
So
all right then. Thanks very much.
well, hang on, Alan, 1 second. I did say there was a fifth
Oh,
reason,
yes, sorry.
which is applicable just to the Brits.
Oh, yes.
Our tax system hasn't changed in essence for many, many decades. And I'm not going to go into detail in this video. We'll leave it till a separate video down the line. But for British citizens who are intent, as most do, on returning home later in their career or to retire, even with one or two changes that Gordon Brown brought in when he was Prime Minister, particularly on the taxation of offshore trusts, which doesn't apply to most people, it only applies to a minority. Offshore investments are still enormously tax beneficial when you are again resident in the UK and taking a benefit, i.e. money, from the offshore investment back into the UK. There are enormous tax benefits. So for the Brits, it's a different reason to invest offshore. First of all, they don't have a choice because they're not allowed to invest, for the most part, into UK pensions or statutory pensions or ISAs. A non-tax resident Brit should not be contributing to either of those. It's against the law. So they have to invest offshore anyway. But there are enormous tax benefits in so doing. So those really are the generic reasons, Alan, why somebody should invest offshore. There are particular reasons, specific reasons, and I'll talk about those in the next video.
Okay, that's great then. Thanks very much indeed. Well, we'll look forward to that because it's obviously very informative, very useful information. So, yeah, thanks again. Well, thanks to all the viewers out there too. If you have any comments, queries, please do contact us at www.teachersmoney.net, Teachers Money, one word, www.teachersmoney.net, and hope to see you again. Please don't forget to subscribe and to like.
Well done,
See
Alan.
you again.
So I was just going to mention, yeah, please do subscribe and hit the like button, and see you in the next video, everyone. Bye for now.
Take care. Bye now.